When my wife told me she was leaving because I was too poor for her, I felt my entire world collapse. She was standing in our small apartment with her bags already packed, her makeup perfect, her eyes cold as she explained that she had found someone better. Someone who could give her the life she deserved. Someone who wasn't a struggling electrician working double shifts just to pay rent. She was 3 months pregnant and she said the baby wasn't mine anyway. She had been sleeping with her boss for almost a year, and now she was moving into his penthouse downtown. I remember standing there in silence, unable to form words while she listed all the ways I had failed her. The car that was too old. The vacations we never took. The jewelry I couldn't afford. The apartment that was too small. She said she had wasted 5 years of her life with me when she could have been building something with someone who actually had potential. Her boss was a real man with a real future, not a loser who came home smelling like sweat and electrical wire every night. She left that night and I didn't try to stop her. What was the point? She had made her choice and it wasn't me. I sat alone in our empty apartment surrounded by the furniture we had picked out together, the photos we had taken on trips we saved for months to afford, the life we had built that apparently meant nothing to her. I cried for the first time since my father's funeral and I didn't stop until the sun came up. The divorce was quick and brutal. She wanted nothing from me because I had nothing worth taking. Her lawyer made sure to emphasize that during every meeting, that my wife was being generous by not pursuing alimony from someone so clearly beneath her station. I signed everything they put in front of me just to make it end. I didn't fight for anything because fighting felt pointless when you've already lost everything that mattered. I threw myself into work after that. Double shifts became triple shifts. I took every job no matter how small or how far away. I saved every penny I could and started taking night classes to get my contractor's license. If she thought I was too poor, then I would prove her wrong even if she never saw it. The anger became fuel and the fuel became ambition, and slowly, painfully, my life started to change. 3 years passed faster than I expected. I got my contractor's license and started my own small electrical company. I hired 2 employees, then 5, then 10. I landed contracts with new construction developments and commercial buildings. The money started coming in faster than I could spend it. I bought a house, a real house with a yard and a garage, something I never could have afforded when I was married. I bought a new truck for work and a nice car for weekends. I started wearing clothes that actually fit instead of whatever was cheapest at the discount store. I dated occasionally but nothing serious. The wound my wife left was still too fresh, the trust too broken. Every woman I met, I wondered if she was just waiting for someone better to come along, if she was calculating my net worth behind her smile, if she would leave me the moment a richer option appeared. It wasn't fair to them and I knew it, so I mostly stayed alone, focused on building the empire my ex-wife said I was too pathetic to create. Then one Sunday morning I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I assumed it was a delivery or maybe one of my employees with an emergency. I opened the door in my sweatpants and old t-shirt, coffee still in hand, completely unprepared for what I was about to see. My ex-wife was standing on my porch. But she didn't look like the woman who had left me 3 years ago. That woman had been polished and confident and cruel. This woman was thin in a way that suggested meals skipped rather than diets followed. Her designer clothes were worn and outdated. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes were red from crying and there were dark circles underneath them that makeup couldn't hide. She said my name like a question, like she wasn't sure it was really me standing there in the doorway of a house she never expected me to own. I said her name back, flat and emotionless, giving her nothing. She asked if she could come in and I almost said no, but something about the desperation in her voice made me step aside. I told myself I just wanted to hear what could possibly bring her to my door after everything she had said and done. She walked into my living room and looked around at the furniture and the decorations and the evidence of a life that had continued and thrived without her. I could see her calculating, reassessing, trying to reconcile the loser she had left with the man who apparently owned all of this. She sat down on my couch without being invited and started crying before I could even ask what she wanted. The story came out in pieces between sobs. Her boss, the rich man she had left me for, had been everything she wanted at first. The penthouse, the vacations, the jewelry, all of it was real and wonderful, and she had been so happy. They got married 6 months after our divorce was finalized. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl that she named after her mother. Life was perfect. Until it wasn't. Her new husband started working later and later. Then he started traveling more and more. Then she found text messages on his phone from other women, multiple other women, saying things that made it clear he had never been faithful to her at all. She confronted him and he laughed. He told her she was replaceable just like the woman before her had been replaceable. He told her she was getting old and boring and he was already grooming her successor at the office. She tried to fight. She hired a lawyer and prepared for a divorce that would at least leave her financially secure. That was when she discovered the truth about her husband's wealth. It was all leveraged, all borrowed, all built on a foundation of debt and deception. The penthouse was mortgaged to the hilt. The cars were leased. The vacations had been paid for with credit cards that were maxed out and overdue. When the creditors came calling, there was nothing left. But that wasn't the worst part, she said through her tears. The worst part was the baby. Her perfect baby girl that she had been raising for almost 3 years, believing she was the product of her great love story with a successful man. Her husband had demanded a DNA test during the divorce proceedings, hoping to avoid child support. The results had come back last week. The baby wasn't his. I felt my stomach drop even though I knew what was coming. My ex-wife looked at me with mascara running down her cheeks and said the words I had never expected to hear. The baby wasn't his, which meant the timeline didn't work, which meant there was only one other possibility. She had calculated the dates wrong when she left me. She had assumed the baby was his because she wanted it to be his. But the DNA didn't lie. I asked her directly if she was saying what I thought she was saying. She nodded and pulled out a crumpled envelope from her purse, handing it to me with shaking hands. It was the DNA results from her husband's test, showing a 0% match. And underneath it was another set of results, from a test she had done secretly using a cup I had thrown away at a coffee shop she had followed me to last month. The second test showed a 99.97% match. The baby was mine. I sat down heavily in the chair across from her because my legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. 3 years ago my wife had left me pregnant with another man's baby. Except it wasn't another man's baby. It was my baby. My daughter. A child I didn't know existed, who had been raised by another man, who called someone else daddy, who had no idea her real father was a stranger her mother had abandoned for being too poor. My ex-wife started talking faster now, desperately trying to explain and justify and minimize what she had done. She said she really had believed the baby was his, that the timing had seemed right, that she never would have kept this from me if she had known. She said she was sorry, so sorry, that she had been young and stupid and dazzled by money, and she saw now how wrong she had been about everything. Then she got to the real reason she was here. Her husband had kicked her out when the DNA results came back. He wanted nothing to do with a child that wasn't his and nothing to do with a wife who had apparently been sleeping with her ex around the time of their affair. She had no money because there was no money. She had no job because she hadn't worked in 3 years. She had no family willing to take her in because she had burned those bridges long ago. She needed help. She needed money. She needed a place to stay. And she thought maybe, since the baby was mine after all, I might be willing to provide those things. She looked at me with those desperate eyes and said she knew she didn't deserve anything from me, but please, please, if not for her then for our daughter who was innocent in all of this. I was quiet for a long time. So long that she started to squirm and backtrack and offer alternative arrangements. Maybe just some money to get an apartment. Maybe just a loan until she got back on her feet. Maybe just help with the baby expenses until she figured something out. Each offer smaller than the last, each one revealing how truly desperate she had become. Finally I asked where the baby was right now. She said her daughter, our daughter, was with a neighbor who was watching her for a few hours. I asked if I could meet her. My ex-wife's face lit up with hope and she immediately pulled out her phone to call the neighbor and arrange for the baby to be brought over. 45 minutes later I met my daughter for the first time. She was beautiful in a way that broke my heart. She had my eyes and my mother's nose and a smile that reminded me of photos of myself as a toddler. She was shy with strangers, hiding behind her mother's legs and peeking out at me curiously. I knelt down to her level and said hello, and she whispered hello back, and I felt something shift inside my chest. My ex-wife watched this interaction with calculating eyes, already sensing that she had played her trump card successfully. I could see her relaxing, assuming that the existence of this child meant I would do whatever she wanted. She started talking about how we could be a family again, how she had learned her lesson, how money didn't matter to her anymore, how she just wanted us to be together. I stood up and told her to stop talking. The harshness in my voice surprised her and she went silent immediately. I told her we needed to have a very different conversation than the one she was imagining. I told her to sit down and listen and not interrupt until I was finished. I told her that I would be pursuing full custody of my daughter. I told her that I had already made a note of her admission that she had stalked me to obtain DNA without my consent, which was illegal. I told her that I would be documenting her current state of homelessness and unemployment and inability to provide for a child. I told her that I had the resources to hire the best family lawyer in the state and I intended to use them. My ex-wife's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, then understanding, then fear, then rage. She started screaming that I couldn't do this, that she was the mother, that courts always sided with mothers, that I was just trying to punish her for leaving me. She called me names I won't repeat and accused me of things that weren't true and threatened to tell everyone I had abandoned her when she was pregnant. I remained calm through all of it, which only made her angrier. When she finally ran out of steam, I told her that I wasn't trying to punish her for leaving. I was trying to protect my daughter from a mother who had already demonstrated that she would choose money over family, who had lied about paternity to trap a wealthy man, who had only come to me now because every other option had failed. I told her she could stay in my guest room tonight because I wasn't cruel enough to send her back out with nowhere to go. But tomorrow we would begin the process of legally establishing my paternity and my rights. She could cooperate and we could work out a reasonable custody arrangement, or she could fight and I would use every resource at my disposal to prove she was an unfit mother. She chose to fight. The next 2 years were the hardest of my life, harder even than the years after she left me the first time. My ex-wife contested everything. She claimed I had known about the pregnancy all along and abandoned her. She claimed I was an abusive partner who she had fled for her safety. She claimed I was only interested in the child to control and hurt her. Every accusation was lies, but lies take time and money to disprove. I hired the best family lawyer I could find, a woman named Patricia who had a reputation for being ruthless and effective. She gathered evidence methodically, documenting every inconsistency in my ex-wife's story. We obtained records of the timeline that proved I couldn't have known about the pregnancy when she left. We gathered statements from friends and family about our relationship and her reasons for leaving. We built a case that was airtight and devastating. The investigation also uncovered things I hadn't expected. My ex-wife's perfect victim narrative started falling apart when investigators looked more closely at her history. There were other men before her boss, other affairs she had hidden during our marriage. There was evidence that she had deliberately gotten pregnant by her boss as an insurance policy, only to discover years later that she had miscounted the dates. There were messages to friends where she bragged about escaping her loser husband for a better model. But the most damning evidence came from her time with her second husband. Financial records showed that she had been complicit in his fraudulent schemes, helping him hide money and deceive creditors. She had opened credit cards in other people's names without their consent. She had lied on loan applications. She was not just a victim of a con man, she was his willing partner until the con collapsed around them both. Armed with all of this, Patricia laid out our case to my ex-wife's lawyer, offering one chance to settle before we went nuclear. My ex-wife could agree to joint custody with primary residence at my house, or we would present all of this evidence to the court and seek full custody with supervised visitation at best. Her lawyer, seeing the mountain of evidence against his client, strongly advised her to take the deal. She refused. She said she would never give up her daughter to me. She said she would fight until her last breath. She said I would regret ever crossing her. Her lawyer quit the next day, tired of representing someone who wouldn't take good advice. She went through 3 more lawyers over the next 6 months, each one eventually giving up on her case. The custody trial lasted 2 weeks. Every day I sat in that courtroom watching my ex-wife's lies get dismantled piece by piece. Her claims of abuse were contradicted by her own social media posts from our marriage showing a happy couple. Her claims that I knew about the pregnancy were contradicted by texts and emails proving she had kept it secret. Her claims of being a devoted mother were contradicted by evidence that she had left our daughter with neighbors for days at a time while she went on trips with her second husband. The evidence of her financial crimes was presented to show her character and judgment. The evidence of her multiple affairs was presented to show a pattern of deception. The evidence of her stalking me to obtain DNA was presented to show that she violated the law when it suited her purposes. By the end of the trial, even the judge was looking at her with barely concealed disgust. The verdict was everything I could have hoped for. I was granted full physical custody of my daughter. My ex-wife was granted supervised visitation every other weekend at a facility that specialized in high-conflict custody cases. She was ordered to pay child support based on imputed income since she was capable of working but choosing not to. She was also referred to the district attorney's office for possible prosecution related to the financial crimes uncovered during the investigation. My ex-wife screamed in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She had to be restrained by bailiffs as she called me every name in the book and promised revenge. She was held in contempt and spent the night in jail, the first of many nights she would spend there over the following months as she repeatedly violated court orders and attempted to contact my daughter outside of approved channels. Bringing my daughter home to live with me full-time was terrifying and wonderful. She was almost 4 years old and had spent her whole life thinking another man was her father. Explaining the truth to her in age-appropriate terms was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. She cried and I cried and we held each other and I promised her that I would always love her and always be there for her no matter what. The adjustment period was rocky. My daughter missed her mother despite everything. She didn't understand why she couldn't see mommy whenever she wanted. She had nightmares and tantrums and days where she screamed that she hated me and wanted to go home. I weathered all of it with patience I didn't know I had, following the advice of the child psychologist I had hired to help with the transition. Slowly, gradually, things got better. My daughter started calling me daddy without prompting. She made friends at the preschool I enrolled her in. She bonded with my employees who spoiled her with attention and treats whenever she visited the office. She started laughing more and crying less. She began to thrive in a way she hadn't when her life was chaos and instability. My ex-wife's supervised visits were disasters at first. She would spend the whole time crying and telling our daughter how much she missed her and how unfair it was that they were kept apart. The supervisors documented all of this, noting that she was using the visits to make our daughter feel guilty rather than to build a healthy relationship. Her visitation was reduced and made contingent on completing a parenting class. She completed the class eventually, grudgingly, and her visits improved marginally. She learned to talk about neutral topics instead of bad-mouthing me. She learned to focus on activities with our daughter rather than emotional manipulation. She learned, slowly, that the only way to maintain any relationship with her child was to follow the rules she had fought so hard against. The criminal charges related to her financial crimes during her second marriage resulted in a plea deal. She served 6 months in county jail and 3 years of probation. I didn't gloat or celebrate when I heard the news. She was still my daughter's mother and despite everything, I didn't want my daughter to grow up knowing her mother was a convicted criminal. We agreed to tell her when she was older, when she could understand the context and nuance. Years passed and our lives settled into a new normal. My company continued to grow and I became one of the most successful electrical contractors in the region. I bought a bigger house in a better neighborhood with excellent schools. I hired a nanny to help when work demanded my attention, but I made sure to be present for every important moment. School plays and soccer games and birthday parties, I was there for all of it. My daughter grew up smart and funny and kind, with just enough of her mother's stubbornness to keep things interesting. She asked about her mother often and I always answered honestly but without malice. Her mother had made bad choices but she still loved her in her own way. People were complicated and relationships were complicated, and sometimes love wasn't enough to make someone act right. The supervised visits eventually transitioned to unsupervised visits as my ex-wife demonstrated that she could follow rules and prioritize our daughter's well-being. They were still limited, every other weekend and some holidays, but they were real visits in her apartment instead of a sterile facility. Our daughter came back from those visits with stories about what she and mommy did together, and I listened without jealousy because she deserved to have a relationship with both her parents. When my daughter was 10, she asked me why mommy left when she was a baby. I had been preparing for this question for years, but it still caught me off guard. I sat down with her and explained as honestly as I could. Mommy had made a mistake. She thought Daddy wasn't good enough because he didn't have enough money. She thought someone else would make her happier. But she was wrong, and by the time she realized it, a lot of damage had been done. My daughter asked if I was still mad at mommy. I thought about it seriously before answering. I told her that I used to be very mad, so mad it felt like fire in my chest all the time. But I wasn't mad anymore. I had built a good life and had her, and being mad at mommy only hurt me, not mommy. I had chosen to let go of the anger and focus on being the best daddy I could be. She hugged me and said I was the best daddy in the whole world, and I held her tight and blinked back tears. This child, who I didn't know existed for the first 3 years of her life, who was brought to me only because every other option had failed, had become the center of my universe. Everything I had accomplished meant nothing compared to her. She was my legacy, my purpose, my reason for everything. My ex-wife eventually got her life somewhat together. She got a job as an administrative assistant and kept it for more than 2 years, which was a record for her. She got her own apartment and furnished it nicely for our daughter's visits. She completed her probation without violations and got her record expunged. She even started dating someone, a quiet accountant who seemed to genuinely care about her. I met the accountant at one of our daughter's school events. He shook my hand and said he knew the history and didn't judge me or my ex-wife for it. People made mistakes when they were young and scared and didn't know better. What mattered was who they chose to be after they recognized their mistakes. He said my ex-wife talked about me with respect now, acknowledging that I had been a good man she hadn't appreciated until it was too late. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and said I hoped they would be happy together. He thanked me for being so gracious and for raising such a wonderful daughter. He said my ex-wife cried sometimes about the years she missed, the years she threw away because she was chasing something that didn't exist. She couldn't get those years back, but she could try to be better in the years remaining. My daughter is 16 now, and she knows the full story. She knows that her mother left because she wanted money more than family. She knows that her mother lied about paternity and committed crimes and went to jail. She knows that her mother only came back when she had nowhere else to go. She knows all of it because she asked to know, and I believed she was old enough to handle the truth. She was angry at her mother for a while after learning everything. She refused to go to visits and wouldn't answer her calls. My ex-wife was devastated and begged me to intervene, but I told her this was the consequence of choices made years ago. Our daughter was old enough to decide for herself what kind of relationship she wanted with her mother. All we could do was give her space to process. Eventually, after about 6 months, our daughter reached out to her mother on her own terms. They had a long conversation that I wasn't part of, just the two of them working through years of complicated feelings. Our daughter came home that night looking exhausted but peaceful. She said she wasn't ready to forgive completely, but she understood that people could change and her mother was trying. She would give her another chance. I'm proud of the young woman my daughter is becoming. She's thoughtful and resilient and knows her own worth in a way her mother never did at her age. She has goals and ambitions that have nothing to do with finding a wealthy partner. She wants to be a pediatric nurse, helping sick children the way doctors and nurses helped her through various childhood illnesses. She has a plan and the grades to make it happen. My business is more successful than I ever imagined it would be. I have over 50 employees now and contracts with major construction companies across the state. The money that my ex-wife thought I would never have, I have more of than I need. I live in a house bigger than anything she dreamed of during our marriage. I drive cars nicer than her second husband's leased luxury vehicles ever were. But none of that is what matters. What matters is the family I've built, the daughter I almost never knew, the life I created from the ashes of what my ex-wife tried to burn down. She thought leaving me was her path to happiness, but it was actually my path to everything. If she hadn't left, I might never have pushed myself to achieve what I've achieved. If she hadn't come back desperate and broken, I might never have known I had a daughter. So in a twisted way, I'm grateful to her. Not for the pain she caused, but for where that pain led me. I'm grateful that she showed me who she really was before we wasted more years together. I'm grateful that her greed and deception collapsed around her and brought my daughter back to me. I'm grateful that I had the strength to fight for custody when she thought I would just be her backup plan. My ex-wife showed up at my door 3 years after leaving me pregnant with what she thought was another man's baby. She came begging for help because she had nowhere else to go. She thought she would manipulate me into taking care of her again, into being the safety net she had thrown away. Instead, she gave me the greatest gift I've ever received and lost the only leverage she had over anyone. She sold that baby's future for a penthouse and jewelry and vacations. She sold that baby to the highest bidder. And when the DNA revealed the truth, the man she sold our daughter to threw them both away like garbage. Now I raised that baby in a house built by hands she said were worthless. Now I provide that baby a life beyond anything her mother's schemes ever achieved. The years that followed were filled with moments I never thought I would experience. My daughter's first day of middle school, her first crush, her first heartbreak, her first real achievement that wasn't just participation but actual recognition of her talents. I was there for all of it. Every tear, every laugh, every milestone that her mother had gambled away for a penthouse that was never really owned. My ex-wife's relationship with the accountant lasted about 2 years before it fell apart. He was a good man, but she couldn't help herself. She started complaining that he was boring, that he didn't take her anywhere exciting, that their life together was too predictable and small. The same patterns that destroyed our marriage started emerging in hers. She wanted more, always more, never satisfied with what she had. The accountant came to me after they broke up, which I found strange until he explained his reasons. He said he wanted to warn me that my ex-wife had been talking during their relationship about ways to get more custody, more money, more control over our daughter. She had consulted with lawyers behind his back about reopening the custody case. She had researched my business looking for any sign of impropriety she could use against me. She had never stopped scheming even while pretending to be reformed. I thanked him for the warning and increased my vigilance. I made sure all my business practices were completely above board, every document filed correctly, every tax paid on time, every employee treated fairly. I gave my ex-wife no ammunition to use against me. When she finally did try to reopen the custody case claiming changed circumstances, her lawyer took one look at my documentation and advised her to drop it immediately. My daughter was 13 when she first asked me about dating. Not for herself, she was still too young and knew it, but about me. Why didn't Daddy have a girlfriend? Why didn't Daddy ever go on dates? Why was Daddy always alone? The questions hit harder than I expected because I had been asking myself the same things for years without finding good answers. The truth was I had been on dates here and there over the years. Coffee with a woman I met at a business conference. Dinner with a friend of a friend who thought we would be compatible. A few attempts at online dating that went nowhere. Nothing ever clicked because I couldn't let my guard down. Every woman I met I evaluated through the lens of my ex-wife's betrayal. Would she leave if someone richer came along? Was she only interested in my money? Could I trust her with my daughter? My daughter told me I deserved to be happy and that she would be okay if I found someone. She said she wasn't a little kid anymore and she could handle Daddy having a girlfriend. She said she actually wanted me to have someone because she worried about me being lonely when she grew up and moved away. The maturity of her concern made me realize how much she had grown up while I wasn't paying attention. I started dating more seriously after that conversation. Not desperately or frantically, but with genuine openness to the possibility of finding someone. I met a woman named Sarah at a charity event my company sponsored. She was a teacher at an elementary school, dedicated to her students and passionate about education. She had been through her own difficult divorce and understood the scars that kind of betrayal leaves behind. Our first date was awkward in all the ways first dates are awkward, but there was something underneath the awkwardness that felt real. She didn't care about my money or my house or my business success. She asked about my daughter and my hobbies and my dreams for the future. She listened when I talked and remembered details I mentioned weeks later. She made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt since before my first marriage fell apart. I introduced Sarah to my daughter after we had been dating for 6 months. I was terrified of how it would go, worried that my daughter would feel replaced or threatened or resentful. Instead, she was curious and welcoming and only slightly protective in the way teenagers get when they think someone might hurt their parent. She interrogated Sarah about her intentions over dinner, and Sarah answered every question with patience and humor. After dinner, my daughter pulled me aside and said she approved. Sarah seemed genuine and kind, and she looked at me like I was special. My daughter said she could tell Sarah wasn't like Mom, wasn't calculating or scheming or waiting for something better. She gave me permission to be happy with her, not that I needed it, but having it meant everything. Sarah and I got married 2 years later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. My daughter was my best man, which confused some of the older relatives but made perfect sense to us. She had been my partner through everything, the person I leaned on during the hardest years, the reason I kept fighting when giving up would have been easier. She deserved to stand beside me on one of the happiest days of my life. My ex-wife was not invited to the wedding, but she found out about it anyway. She showed up at my house the night before, drunk and crying, demanding to know why I was doing this to her. Why I was replacing her. Why I was giving another woman the life she should have had. I told her calmly that she had made her choice years ago and these were the consequences. She chose to leave. She chose someone else. She chose wrong. Now I was choosing happiness and she didn't get a vote. She tried to crash the wedding the next day, but security stopped her at the door. She made a scene in the parking lot, screaming about how I had stolen her daughter and ruined her life, and now I was flaunting my success in her face. The police were called and she was escorted away. My daughter saw some of it through a window and cried, not because she wanted her mother there but because she was embarrassed that her mother would do something like that on what should have been a happy day. Sarah handled the situation with grace I didn't know was possible. She comforted my daughter and assured her that none of this was her fault. She told her that some people couldn't handle seeing others happy because it reminded them of their own unhappiness. She said we weren't going to let one person's bad behavior ruin our celebration of love and family. She was right, and we didn't. The honeymoon was the first real vacation I had taken in years. We went to Italy for 2 weeks, eating pasta and drinking wine and wandering through ancient streets holding hands like teenagers. I checked in on my daughter every day via video call and she pretended to be annoyed, but I could tell she was happy to see me so relaxed. She said I looked younger, like the stress I had been carrying for years had finally melted away. When we returned home, we settled into a new normal as a blended family. Sarah moved into my house and started making it our house instead of just mine. She added touches of warmth and color that I never would have thought of. She reorganized the kitchen so it actually made sense. She planted a garden in the backyard that my daughter helped her tend on weekends. The house that had been a symbol of my success became a home filled with love. My daughter and Sarah developed their own relationship separate from me. They went shopping together and watched movies I had no interest in and had conversations I wasn't part of. Sarah never tried to replace my daughter's mother, she was very clear about that from the beginning. But she became something else, a trusted adult who wasn't a parent, someone my daughter could talk to about things she might not want to discuss with her dad. My ex-wife's behavior after the wedding got worse before it got better. She violated the custody agreement multiple times, showing up at my daughter's school or sports events when it wasn't her scheduled time. She sent inappropriate messages to my daughter's phone criticizing me and Sarah and trying to turn her against us. She filed frivolous motions with the court that wasted everyone's time and money. The court eventually had enough of her behavior. Her visitation was reduced again and made conditional on completing therapy and maintaining stable employment. She lost her job around the same time because she had been missing work to stalk my daughter's activities. She couldn't afford her apartment and had to move in with a friend who got tired of her drama within months. She was spiraling and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. My daughter asked to stop seeing her mother when she was 15. She said the visits were always stressful, always filled with her mother's complaints and criticisms and attempts at manipulation. She said she felt worse after every visit, not better, and she didn't understand why she had to keep subjecting herself to that. She asked if she was old enough to decide for herself. I talked to our lawyer and to my daughter's therapist before making any decisions. Both said that at 15, her preferences would carry significant weight with the court, especially given the documented history of her mother's behavior. The therapist said forcing continued visitation against my daughters could damage our relationship and my daughter's mental health. She recommended supporting my daughter's decision while leaving the door open for reconciliation in the future. We filed a motion to modify custody based on my daughter's stated preferences and my ex-wife's continued pattern of problematic behavior. My ex-wife fought it viciously, accusing me of parental alienation, claiming I had brainwashed my daughter against her, demanding psychological evaluations of everyone involved. The court appointed a guardian ad litem to investigate and report on what was in my daughter's best interests. The guardian ad litem spent weeks interviewing everyone involved. She talked to my daughter alone multiple times. She talked to me and Sarah. She talked to my ex-wife. She reviewed years of court documents and therapy records and school reports. Her final report was damning for my ex-wife, documenting pattern after pattern of behavior that prioritized her own emotional needs over her daughter's well-being. The court granted my daughter's request. Visitation was suspended indefinitely, to be revisited only if my ex-wife completed a specific therapy program and demonstrated sustained changed behavior. My ex-wife collapsed when the ruling was read, sobbing that we had taken everything from her, that she had nothing left, that we had destroyed her life. The judge reminded her that she had been given multiple opportunities to change her behavior and had squandered every single one. My daughter cried that night too, but they were complicated tears. Relief and grief and guilt and freedom all mixed together. She said she felt bad for her mother even though she knew her mother had brought this on herself. She said she wished things had been different, that her mother had been the kind of person who could put her daughter's needs first. She said maybe someday she would try again, but not now, not while it still hurts so much. Sarah and I supported her through the complicated emotions that followed. There was no roadmap for this, no guide for helping a teenager process the decision to cut off contact with a parent. We did our best to validate her feelings while reassuring her that she had made the right choice for herself. We reminded her that protecting herself wasn't selfish, it was necessary, and that she could change her mind in the future if circumstances changed. High school flew by faster than I expected. My daughter joined clubs and played sports and maintained grades that would make any parent proud. She applied to colleges with essays that talked about resilience and growth and learning that family was about more than biology. She got accepted to her top choice, a nursing program at a respected university 3 hours away. Close enough to visit but far enough to be her own person. The summer before she left for college was bittersweet. We tried to pack in as many memories as possible, family dinners and movie nights and one last big vacation together. Sarah and I took her to Europe for 2 weeks, visiting countries she had always wanted to see. We took hundreds of photos and ate too much food and laughed until our stomachs hurt. It felt like a celebration and a goodbye at the same time. Move-in day at her college dorm was chaos and tears and excitement all mixed together. We helped her carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs and set up her tiny room and meet her roommate who seemed nice enough. When there was nothing left to do, we stood in the parking lot saying goodbye. My daughter hugged me and whispered thank you for fighting for me in my ear, and I lost the battle against my tears completely. The house was quiet after she left in a way it had never been before. Sarah helped fill the silence, but there was still an absence that couldn't be ignored. I found myself wandering into my daughter's room sometimes, looking at the posters she left behind and the books on her shelves and the photos stuck to her mirror. The evidence of a childhood that had passed while I wasn't looking. She called every Sunday like she promised, telling us about her classes and her new friends and the challenges of living with a stranger in a space the size of a closet. She was thriving, finding her footing in this new chapter of her life, becoming the independent woman I always knew she could be. Every call ended with "I love you," and every call made my heart both swell and ache. My ex-wife reached out to my daughter during her freshman year of college. A letter sent to her dorm room, not email or text but an actual handwritten letter. My daughter called me panicked after receiving it, unsure whether to open it or throw it away or send it back. I told her the choice was hers and I would support whatever she decided. She decided to read it. The letter was an apology. A real apology, not the manipulative pseudo-apologies my ex-wife had offered in the past. She took responsibility for her choices and their consequences. She acknowledged that she had failed as a mother in fundamental ways. She didn't make excuses or shift blame or ask for anything in return. She just said she was sorry and she understood if her daughter never wanted to speak to her again. My daughter didn't respond to the letter immediately. She sat with it for weeks, processing what it meant and whether she believed it was genuine. She talked to her therapist and to Sarah and to me, working through her complicated feelings. Finally she decided to write back, a short letter that didn't forgive or reconcile but opened a door to possible future communication. They exchanged letters throughout her college years. Slowly, carefully, they built something that wasn't quite a relationship but wasn't nothing either. My ex-wife had finally gotten the therapy she needed and done the work on herself that the court had ordered years ago. She was living a smaller, quieter life, working as a receptionist and renting a modest apartment and not chasing money or status anymore. My daughter invited her mother to her college graduation. It was a risk and we all knew it, but my daughter felt ready to take it. She wanted to see if the person in those letters was real or just another performance. She wanted to give her mother one more chance to be present for an important moment without making it about herself. My ex-wife came to the graduation and behaved impeccably. She sat in the audience and applauded when my daughter walked across the stage. She didn't cause a scene or demand attention or try to take credit for my daughter's accomplishments. Afterward she hugged my daughter briefly and said she was proud of her and then stepped back to let the rest of us celebrate. It was the most appropriate she had ever been. At the reception I found myself standing near my ex-wife for the first time in years. She looked older than her age, worn down by years of bad choices and their consequences. But there was also something different in her eyes, a quietness that hadn't been there before. She looked at me and said she was sorry for everything. Not just the custody battles or the wedding crash or the stalking, but everything from the very beginning. Leaving me. Lying about paternity. Treating me like I was worthless when I was anything but. I didn't know what to say so I just nodded. She said she knew that wasn't enough and that it would never be enough. Some mistakes couldn't be made right, only acknowledged. She said she was grateful that I had raised our daughter so well, that she had become such an incredible person despite having a mother who failed her in every possible way. She said I had been the father she never could have been as a mother. I told her that I accepted her apology, and I meant it. The anger I had carried for so long had faded over the years, replaced by something closer to pity. She had spent almost 2 decades chasing things that didn't matter while losing everything that did. She had sacrificed her daughter for money and ended up with neither. The karma was so complete it didn't need my anger to make it worse. My daughter started her career as a pediatric nurse the following year. She moved to a city 4 hours away and started building her own life independent of me and Sarah and her mother. She was good at her job, compassionate and skilled and dedicated to her young patients. She dated someone for a while, then dated someone else, then found a person who seemed like they might be the one. She was living the full life I had always wanted for her. I'm 62 years old now and my daughter is 31. She's been married for 3 years to a wonderful man who treats her like the queen she is. They have a son, my grandson, who is the most perfect creature I have ever seen. He has my eyes and his mother's smile and a laugh that makes everything else in the world disappear. When he calls me grandpa I feel a joy I can't put into words. Sarah and I are still happily married after all these years. She's retired from teaching now and spends her days gardening and reading and spoiling our grandson whenever we visit. We travel when we can, checking off places from the bucket list we made together years ago. We're talking about selling the big house and downsizing to something more manageable, something that doesn't have so many stairs. My ex-wife has a limited but real relationship with our daughter now. She visits occasionally and is appropriate during those visits. She has met her grandson a few times and managed not to say anything terrible. She's not the mother our daughter deserved, but she's trying to be someone our daughter can have in her life without it causing damage. It's not perfect, but it's progress. She and I don't talk much, but there's no hostility anymore. When we see each other at family events, we nod politely and make small talk about the weather or the food. Sometimes I catch her looking at me with an expression I can't quite read. Regret maybe, or wonder at how differently things turned out than she imagined. I don't dwell on it. She made her choices and I made mine, and here we are. My business still runs even though I've stepped back from day-to-day operations. The employees I hired and trained over the years have taken over most of the responsibilities. I still go into the office a few times a week to keep my mind sharp and to check on things. They don't really need me anymore, but they humor me because they know I built this company from nothing and I need to see that it's still standing. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been if things had been different. If my ex-wife had never left. If I had never been forced to rebuild myself from rock bottom. If she had told me the truth about our daughter from the beginning instead of lying and scheming and selling her to the highest bidder. The alternate timeline is impossible to imagine because it would have created a completely different person than the one I became. I'm grateful for who I became even though the path to get here was brutal. I'm grateful for the strength I discovered I had. I'm grateful for the success I built with my own hands. I'm grateful for Sarah and the love she brought into my life when I had given up on ever finding it. Most of all, I'm grateful for my daughter, the child I didn't know I had for 3 years, the greatest gift hidden inside the worst betrayal. My ex-wife showed up at my door begging because she had sold our daughter's future and gotten nothing in return. She thought I was too poor to matter. She thought I would always be beneath her. She thought the man she left would give her everything I couldn't. She was wrong about all of it. And now she has to watch me live the life she threw away while she survives the consequences of her own choices. That's not revenge. That's just reality. And reality is the one thing she never could accept. My daughter called me last night just to talk. Nothing urgent or important, just wanting to hear my voice and tell me about her day. Her son had taken his first steps and she wanted to share the moment with me even though I wasn't there to see it. She sent videos and photos and we laughed together over the phone about how he wobbled like a tiny drunk person.